All right, let's jump right in. Have you ever looked at a big problem in our society and just thought, hey, another country has already figured this out. Why don't we just do what they're doing? It feels like total common sense, right? But when we're talking about the law, is it really that simple? Can you literally just copy and paste a successful law from one nation to another?
I mean, it's a classic dilemma. Whether you're in business or engineering or even just planning a party, you got to decide, do you invent a brand new solution from scratch or do you just borrow a best practice that's already proven to work? Well, lawmakers face this exact choice all the time. They're constantly looking abroad for inspiration, a practice that's actually called legal transplantation. But it raises this huge question. Does it actually work?
Okay, so to get our heads around this, let's use a really powerful metaphor. Is a law like a carburetor? A standard mechanical part that you can just pop out of one engine and swap into another pretty easily? Or is it more like a kidney, a complex, living organ that, if you try to transplant it, runs a huge risk of being rejected by the host body if it isn't a perfect match? Which one is it? That's really the core question we're going to explore today.
To really get this, we've got to go back in time and look at the traditional answer. And that comes from one of history's first-grade comparative lawyers, the French philosopher Montesquieu. And let me tell you, he had a very clear, very powerful warning about borrowing laws. And this whole debate was brilliantly re-examined in a landmark 1974 article by this scholar right here, Sir Otto Confreund. He's really our guide for this whole explainer. And he kicked off his analysis by going right back to that classic warning from Montesquieu.
So what was Montesquieu's big warning? Well, back in the 18th century, he argued that laws have to be so uniquely tailored to the people they govern that it's a grand hazard, a great coincidence, if the laws of one nation could ever really suit another. In plain English, it's a massive stroke of luck if one country's laws happen to work in another. For Montesquieu, there was no question. A law is a kidney, period. He was convinced that legal transplants were almost guaranteed to fail because laws aren't just universal machine parts, they are deeply, intimately connected to the specific people they govern. And what's really interesting here is why he thought this. For him, a nation's laws grew organically, right out of its unique environment. He pointed to all this stuff, from the climate and the soil to the religion, the customs, even the type of government, as the ecosystem that creates a country's unique spirit of the laws. You can't just pluck a law out of that specific soil and expect it to thrive somewhere else. It just won't work.
But that was the 18th century. In his 1974 article, Otto Confreund argued that while Montesquieu was totally right for his time, the world has fundamentally changed. The old barriers to transplantation have started to weaken, but a powerful new one has risen to take their place. Just think about it. Industrialization, urbanization, mass media, all of these things have kind of flattened the world. The lives of people in developed countries have become incredibly similar. The problems you see from industrial accidents or housing or traffic, they're pretty much the same in Manchester, Cincinnati, or Tokyo. So this cultural and economic convergence makes a lot of Montesquieu's old barriers seem, less important to.
But, and this is Confreund's crucial insight, just as those old cultural and geographical walls were starting to crumble, a new, stronger, and much more subtle barrier was being built. An obstacle that is purely political.
So here's the key idea. The biggest obstacle to legal transplantation today is what Confreund called the political factor. Now, this isn't just about presidents and parliaments. It's about the unique distribution of power among all the organized groups in a society. Think trade unions, corporations, professional bodies like lawyers and doctors, religious institutions, you name it. The amount of influence these groups have is different in every single country.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this all play out in the real world? Let's take a look at a few case studies that Confreund himself used to test this whole idea.
First up, family law. Now, you'd think this is an area that would be the most resistant to transplantation, right? It's so deeply tied to culture, religion, and custom, all of Montesquieu's barriers. But the reality is way more interesting, and it's a perfect illustration of this political factor in action. So, on the one hand, ideas about divorce reform spread with amazing ease from places like Australia and New Zealand to England back in the 20th century. Why? Well, because social views on marriage were basically converging. The social soil was similar enough for the transplant to take root. But then you look at the total contrast with Ireland, where divorce was banned in the Constitution for decades. Was that because Irish culture was just fundamentally different? Nope. It was because of the specific, concentrated political power of a single organized group, the Catholic Church. The real barrier wasn't culture, it was politics. Let's try a second case, the laws that govern our courtrooms and our workplaces. In these areas, the link between a law and the power of organized groups becomes even more crystal clear. See, laws that protect individual workers, things like rules against unfair dismissal, they can be transplanted relatively easily. It's a common problem, it needs a common solution. But what about rules for collective bargaining, or the very structure of the court system itself? These are incredibly difficult to copy. And why is that? Well, it's because they are directly tied to the unique political power of groups like trade unions and the legal profession in each country. A country with really powerful unions is going to have a totally different system than one with weak unions. Makes sense, right? And a country where the legal profession has immense power will fight tooth and nail against any change to the courts that threatens that power. The transplant fails because it challenges an entrenched political structure.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? If you're a lawmaker today and you're looking to borrow a good idea from another country, Confron's analysis gives you a powerful, really practical guide for figuring out if it's going to succeed or if it's going to fail.
And it really boils down to this simple two-step process. Step 1, check the social soil. Is the underlying problem you're trying to fix actually similar in both places? That's usually the easy part. But step 2, this is the game changer. You have to X-ray the political structure. Who holds the real power in both societies? Is the balance of power between businesses, unions, churches, and other organized groups roughly the same? Because if those political power structures are too different, that new law, that organ is going to be rejected. So the next time you hear someone say, they have this amazing law in Denmark, why can't we have it here? You now have a whole new framework to think about that question. Ask yourself, is the real obstacle some vague difference in our national culture, or is it, as Freund so powerfully argued, something much more concrete, something you can actually point to, the unique distribution of political power in our society? It's a question worth thinking about. Thanks for joining us.